Art. Is it truthful? Who has the right to say if it is or isn't? Let's take the iconic painting, The Monarch of the Glen, an image that has been replicated and repurposed, from scarves to socks, from t-shirts to TV shows. But is this a portrait of nature, or a potentially problematic idea of Scotland? What are we really looking at when we see The Monarch of the Glen? Is it a real or a romantic image of Scotland?
Well, it's actually a painting I really love. The lights, the colours, the majesty of the animal. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous painting.
Though I can objectively say it's a beautiful piece of art, it does leave me with a bitter taste in the mouth.
It does become more fascinating, like many paintings do, the closer you can get.
It's not a painting that I like. I find it conceals more than it shows.
Painted by Sir Edwin Landseer, an English artist who was very drawn to Scotland, this painting at first glance might seem a straightforward image. But look a little deeper, and you might be surprised by what you find.
It was commissioned for the House of Parliament, interestingly for essentially the dining room of the House of Lords. And that's a bit of an odd one because it's not the grand spaces that people like William Dyce and other artists presented. It's not the room where the Queen robes or processes to go and open the House of Parliament, but would have been very central and visible. And essentially Landseer could name his price, but when it came down to it, as often happened with these projects, the politicians didn't want to pay the price that he had named. So it was made for a political setting and then sold on the private market.
I think it's interesting to look at the context around Landseer himself, what he was going through in his life, the kinds of social networks he was involved in, and also what potentially he is trying to represent here in terms of that new idea of the Highlands, the Balmorality, as they called it, after Balmoral Castle when Queen Victoria was spending so much time in Scotland.
Well, Landseer had painted stags really from when he first came to Scotland in the 1820s. It's a motif that he repeated. He also engaged in the whole hunting, shooting lifestyle as other artists did when they came to Scotland in the season.
The stag being that monarch kind of implies that there is no other monarch in the Glen. Potentially it could be seen as a rebuke to earlier notions of kingship, and in so short a space of time that's replaced with, here is an image of something beautiful that you can kill, that you are allowed to kill, that is entirely in your control both as viewer and as rich individual visiting the Highlands.
The picture itself has two aspects to it. It has the stag and the Glen, and the stag is in the foreground, and it is the monarch, which is the Latin derived term, and in the background there is the Glen, which is partly visible and is the Gaelic derived term. You also have the sense that this is the monarch of an empty place. There is no other sign of life other than the stag. And it is an empty place, of course it is, but there are reasons why it is an empty place. It's a place that's been emptied of people.
It very much reflects ideas of the time of somebody in control of their land. And again, that's why I think this is like a portrait, because it could quite easily be a figure of a chieftain or something, a landowner there in the glens. And we've got versions of that, but here it's the animal. So it's sense imbuing the stag with ideas that had been associated with portraiture, which Landseer also did.
The monarch of an empty space, a glen, a wilderness. It may be a portrait of power, freedom, or isolation, but what does this painting not show us?
The reality of the dynamic, messy, difficult Scotland. So in a way, these great machines, which show these awe-inspiring views of Scotland, show one view, but there's all other things happening.
From the late 18th century, you've had people being evicted from their lands. You've had, even before that point, you've had the clan systems deliberately being broken up. So in the run-up to this painting, you've had a couple of major waves of clearances.
It was a period of famine, it was a period of abject destitution and squalor. And there's evidence from journals of people who were with Landseer in the Highlands that they were going on trips where they were seeing that happening. But none of that is reflected in Landseer's depictions of what was going on at that time. It elides that aspect of history from the story.
People who have owned plantations in the Caribbean, and unfortunately that means owning enslaved African people, when compensation happens in the 1830s, 47,000 enslavers are compensated for the so-called property. We're talking about human beings here. Some of the people in Scotland who receive that money are able to use the profits to buy up vast areas of land, and these are the new elite in Scotland.
If you look at travellers' accounts from the late 18th century, the Highlands are described, the mountains are described as savage, as hideous, as frightening. It's a place really to be avoided and only travelled to if you needed to. But by the beginning of the 19th century, that had been transformed into the Highlands as a romantic idyll, as a place where you could experience the sublime. When we think about the people that Landseer was painting for, which was that social elite that were coming to the Highlands in the 1820s, the 1830s, with one purpose in mind. They were there to slaughter deer. That was the purpose of them coming. And in doing so, in their minds, in the propaganda that, or the ideology that Landseer is creating, they themselves are becoming the monarchs of their glens. And it's a very simplified understanding of human society that they're inheriting. And that has been the case in the Highlands and Islands for the last 150 years since that period, which is why I think The Monarch of the Glen is such an iconic and influential piece of work, because it speaks to a historical process that Landseer himself was part of.
When you think of Scotland, what do you see? Is it tartan kilts, bagpipes, the lochs and mountains? Have you ever wondered why these images come to mind and where they have come from?
I think it's really important for us to look at the wider context behind very well-known artworks to see if we can understand something deeper and more complex about the image. But also looking at who's creating it, why they're creating it, what are the circumstances around it, and all the different kinds of meanings that we could potentially take away from painting like this.
I think it still has a resonance as an idea of Scotland, but I'm surprised how long and strong that idea has lasted for, because it's been criticised, thought about, recontextualised so many times, and yet it still has power.
The romance of the Highlands and Islands is alive and thriving. There's a tourism industry that's growing fat off it, but there's also more of a questioning of what kind of society is this? And for me, that's one of the lessons of The Monarch of the Glen in the 21st century as a social production and as a cultural production, which is now being challenged by reinterpretations of that older culture and the social system that had been crushed to some degree by the monarchy of the Glen. What we're now seeing in the Highlands is the democratisation of the Glen.
I'm fascinated by the mist in the painting of The Monarch of the Glen. In these images of the Highlands, quite often it's presented as an Eden or as a place untouched by concepts of civility and things like that. And so whenever I see a piece of visual art like that, I try to imagine, okay, where are the gales? And I like the idea that they're just out of sight. They're in that mist. You can't see them, but they're looking back at you.
Myths, migration, rewritten histories. The Monarch of the Glen holds many different meanings and perspectives. It might be your favourite painting of Scotland, or it might represent something darker, an unrealistic image that erases key parts of Scottish history. It's important to bear in mind who this was for, what else was going on at this time, and who are we not seeing in the frame.
Ca bhfuil sin an sealadh go bhonarc seo, chanil fallasarin, an sclá sin canimí go raibh, gur sinne an ceád sin MacLeòid, an ceá ceilteach ar a déan sibh mollach, go níos géil sin ann, fallasan ga chuairteachach, ha sin a líanaigh a scabain.